Welcome back, July 1st, 2021. I was listening to another show on 960 this morning when a caller asked the host, can you tell me what woke means? And it dawns on me the neologisms have been coming fast and furious, and they, as we described in the case of critical race theory, can be very confusing, even sometimes when conservatives try to explain them. The point is to fuddle them, old Screwtape told his nephew. And they do fuddle us, don't they? With new words whose meanings seem nearly exclusively shaped by the dictionary of Humpty Dumpty. You remember that from Through the Looking Glass? I don't know what you mean by glory, Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice knockdown argument for you. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use the word, Humpty Dumpty said, in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, who is to be master, that's all. Many of you also know this as the argument of Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic. Power is just the interest of the strongest. Many of you know this as basic positive law, unrestrained by natural rights or anything else, and of course thus the building block of every form of tyranny known to history. Funny enough, just yesterday here I was speaking of the conflict between natural right and positive law in the context of some of what Ilhan Omar was saying on Tuesday. I had occasion to quote the philosopher Leo Strauss. Let me continue where I left off. He wrote, to reject natural right is tantamount to saying that all right is a positive right, and this means primarily that what is right is defined exclusively by legislatures and courts. Now, it is obviously meaningful and sometimes even necessary to speak of unjust laws or unjust decisions. In passing such judgments, we imply that there is a standard of right and wrong independent of positive right or power, and higher than positive right or power. A standard with reference to which we are able to judge of positive right. Many people today hold the view that the standard in question is in the best case nothing but the ideal or ideals of a society. But according to the same view, all societies have their ideals. Certainly all cultures do. Cannibal societies and cultures no less than civilized ones. If principles are sufficiently justified by the fact that they are accepted as ideals by society, the principles of cannibalism are as legitimate as the principles of the Declaration of Independence. If there is no standard higher than the ideals of one society, there exists no possibility of taking critical distance from those ideals. But the mere fact that we can raise the question of the worth of the ideals of our society shows that there is something in man that is not altogether enslaved to his society, and therefore that we are able and even obliged to look for a standard with reference to which we can judge of the ideals of our society as well as of any other society. Let me illustrate it this way, if I might. Given Western notions of freedom of speech, religion, inquiry, association, and press, a cannibalistic society will never question itself. A non-cannibalistic society is much more likely to. End of story. So, no, there are certain conditions to freedom, the breach of which is to enter the territory of tyranny, redefining words as much as redefining people. And they usually go hand in hand. Think of the dysphemisms we use for those whose human rights we tried to deny. If they're black, or if they are untermenschen to another society, they might be called a slave. Here in America and in certain other societies, N and other words to delegitimize the humanity of a black person. Fetus to delegitimize the humanity of an unborn child. So the word woke should be understood, I believe, and I'd really like the mainstream media to understand its understanding from the get-go, ab initio, from its origin, from its etymology, because its very opposite original meaning from today's meaning is so very different from today's meaning that I believe if we restored the original meaning of the word woke, we would find the roadmap to more racial harmony and justice in this country. The word woke actually first made its appearance in the New York Times. It was the year 1962 in an op-ed by one William Melvin Kelly. The op-ed was titled, quote, "No Mickey Mouse can be expected to follow today's Negro idiom without a hip assist. If you're woke, you dig it," close quote. Pardon my using the vernacular and parlance of 1962, but for purposes of preserving the original, I'd like to. Mr. Kelly was writing about an ad he saw in the New York City subway. The oddest thing is what Kelly wrote in 1962 about his culture, that of what he called the American Negro. He said, despite some of the new words coming out of the African American community, the black man, quote, wants to be completely accepted in American life, not differentiated with special terminologies. He dreams of living in a good neighborhood, driving a nice car, sending his children to a good school, making a decent living. He realizes that anything which sets him apart will keep him apart, close quote. Of course, that in fact was the main goal of civil rights in the 1960s, integration, mainstreaming into all of American life. Somewhere, somehow, that became no longer the goal, but the enemy of the goal. Integration was transmogrified into re and self-segregation. Judgments by race, then deemed odious, have become de rigueur and anti-racist, at least to what we have now maintained and mainstreamed as the woke consciousness, which is consciousness raised, black power, not human or equal consciousness, racial consciousness. Are you aware of how odious the idea of racial power or the power of race was to the integrationist ethic, the ethic of the inventor of the term woke, even? Let me read you a quote from a little later in that decade. 4 years later, 1966, quote, "We've heard a lot of talk over the last few months of black power, and we've started hearing talk of white power. But I don't talk about black power or white power. I would prefer to believe in a kind of striped power, where black and white together we work to achieve the legitimate power that all of God's children must have to function in life. The fact that there is no separate black path to power and fulfillment that does not intersect white routes is the fact of America. There is no white path to power and fulfillment short of chaos that does not share that power with black aspirations of freedom and human dignity. What we must come to see is that we are tied together, and every Negro is a little white and every white person is a little Negro. All of our music, our language, our material, prosperity, even our foods are an amalgam of black and white. So the Negro needs the white man to save him from his fears, while the white man needs the Negro to save him from his guilt. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality." Guess who said that? Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at Monmouth University. King, Reverend, Christian church. The Smithsonian last year told us Christianity, however, is a badge and symbol of being white. Got it? Oh, and those values of the inventor of the term woke from African-American writer William Melvin Kelly? Again, as he wrote, the African-American dreamed of, quote, living in a good neighborhood, driving a nice car, sending his children to a good school, making a decent living, close quote. Those last two, to the Smithsonian, are badges and symbols of whiteness, sending children to a good school, making a decent living. To those of us who still dream what we consider the possible dream of there being minimal differences among and between the races in America when it comes to economic and judicial and economic opportunities and outcomes, that dream sure is still today our dream. We just believe the current redefinition of that which constitutes woke or enlightened is little more than being like prisoners in the Platonic cave, seeing falsity and thinking it's real. John McWhorter of Columbia University put it this way recently. He wrote, "In the 1960s, a new and powerful fashion in black thought, inherited from the general countercultural mood, rejected championing assimilation to proposing that opposition to whiteness is the soul of blackness. Meanwhile, white leftists encouraged as many poor black women as possible to go on welfare, hoping to bankrupt the government and inaugurate a fairer America. Soon, being on welfare in poor black communities became a new normal, hardly the usual, but so common that people grow up seeing not working for living as ordinary. Then at the same time comes drugs. By the way, working hard for a living was also a symbol and badge of whiteness, according to the Smithsonian. But all this happened at the same time came the drugs. This then felt more natural to young men than it would to have their fathers around because, one, the new mood sanctioned dismissing traditional values as those of the chump, while two, it no longer felt alien to eschew legal employment. And three, the drugs helped make it that most boys in these deprived neighborhoods would grow up without fathers, all the more so. I could call all of this common sense. I could call it the obvious. I could call it the equivalent of 2 + 2 equaling 4. You pay people only if there is no father. What are you going to get? More money and less fathers. But as California and other woke states are proposing right now, I can't say it's like 2 + 2 equaling 4 anymore, and no one who sees today's society having read George Orwell can say it either. Because, yeah, there are states now, and California is one of them, that are going to propose that there is such a thing as mathematical racism, and 2 + 2 equaling 4 can constitute that. But I show you the times. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.